as well, please.
All right, I will. I'm John Yarmuth, United States Representative from the 3rd District of Kentucky. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, and members of the committee, thank you for inviting me here this afternoon. It's an honor to testify before the Council's Labor and Economic Development Committee. As you can imagine, I've participated in hundreds of congressional hearings, but this is my first time testifying before Metro Council. It's nice to know this time somebody may be listening. In all seriousness, though, during my 8 years in Congress, I've generally made it a point to leave local governance to our local elected officials, although I did find myself tempted to yell out aye when you had that voice vote. I've made an exception in this case because I believe the issue of poverty-level wages is one that demands our attention, our focus, and our understanding, and we must address it now. As you know, I am a co-sponsor of the House bill to raise the federal minimum wage to $10.10 per hour over 3 years. That bill is similar to the one you're considering now. So the reason I'm here today is simple. Although most Americans support raising the minimum wage, Congress is too gridlocked to enact this legislation. So over the past couple of years, states and local governments, frustrated with the lack of action in Washington, have taken steps to raise wages in their jurisdictions. And I will say for the record, I would greatly prefer that this raise of the minimum wage happen in Washington on a national basis, and if not, in Kentucky on a statewide basis. Neither one of those appears ready to happen. I'm here in support of a more livable wage in our community, to applaud you for your efforts on this ordinance so far, and to advocate for our community to lead this effort in Kentucky. This committee has already heard from economists both for and against raising the minimum wage. You've also heard hyperbolic warnings from GLI that if we raise the minimum wage in Louisville, unemployment will rise, businesses will relocate, and we will have ceded control of basic business decisions to the government. This does not conform to the evidence we've seen in communities and states who are leading the way on living wages. So I'd like to share my perspective as well as what I hear from my constituents, which are your constituents. A livable minimum wage will help Louisville's low-income workers begin to break the cycle of poverty. It won't eliminate poverty, nor is it designed to, but it will make life a little better for those at the bottom of the economic ladder. A livable minimum wage will immediately reduce dependence on public assistance. According to the Department of Labor, a $10.10 minimum wage would save the government $4.6 billion a year just in reducing demand for food stamps and other public assistance. And this is a point I always stress. If a business is paying less than a living wage, its business model is being subsidized by the taxpayers. To make ends meet, many low-wage employees rely on taxpayer assistance, more than $3,800 per fast food employee each year, according to the National Employment Law Project. That's a $1.2 billion annual subsidy to McDonald's Corporation alone. And I want to stress, I know in the GLI report, the recommendation was that we just expand EITC. To me, all that is doing is recommending that taxpayers increase their subsidy to these employers. That's all EITC is a subsidy to employers who don't pay their employees enough to live on. And by the way, also a recent Cal Berkeley study showed that 47% of all minimum wage earners in the United States are on public assistance of some form or other. Finally, a livable minimum wage would increase the spending power of tens of thousands of Louisvillians. More than 62,000 people in our community would get a raise, both those currently working for minimum wage and those earning near it. According to the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy, a $10.10 minimum wage statewide would boost our Commonwealth's economy by $421 million. Earlier this year, more than 600 economists, including 7 Nobel Prize winners, sent a letter to Congress advocating for a $10.10 federal minimum wage. They wrote that it would have little to no negative impact on employment while boosting consumer spending. And by the way, I just heard within the last couple of days, Governor Romney, former presidential candidate, recommended raising the minimum wage, as did Jeff Immelt, the CEO of General Electric. I have been following this debate in our community closely, and I want to thank you all for your thoughtful examination of this proposal and the issues that surround it. We're also fortunate to have the benefit of other cities and states that have raised their minimum wages during the past several years. We've seen successes in Santa Fe, San Francisco, and now Seattle. And of the 13 states that have raised their minimum wages this year, 12 of them have had faster unemployment growth than neighboring states where the minimum wage remains stagnant. I know you are examining those cases as well. And I want to close by sharing a story from one of my constituents. She's a college graduate and single mom with 2 kids. She lost her job and had to take another that paid just above minimum wage, $7.25 an hour. She sent me a breakdown of her expenses. 30% of her take-home pay went to child care, 25% to rent, another 25% to car payments and insurance. The rest went to groceries, utilities, and other basic living expenses. She had no health insurance and applied for food stamps to feed her kids. Sue worked 6 days a week and tried to get overtime whenever she could. There were times, she wrote, when she washed the kids' clothes in the bathtub because she didn't have a few dollars for the laundromat. Opponents of a living wage tell us that Sue's situation doesn't exist. They tell us minimum wage jobs are for the young, they're temporary, they're stepping stones, but that just doesn't match reality. In fact, the average minimum wage worker is 35 years old, earns about $15,000 a year for full-time work, which is 36% below the federal poverty level. 2/3 of minimum wage earners in America today are women, and 1 in 4 is a parent, just like Sue. She told me, and I quote, "I couldn't even afford to take a few hours off from work to go job hunting because the overtime pay was the only money I had in the budget to pay the electric bill and buy soap and toilet paper." And that brings up the biggest myth of all, that minimum wage jobs are stepping stones. If getting by on these jobs prevents people from seeking higher education or training or even applying for a better job, then a minimum wage job is a stepping stone on a road that's going nowhere. For Sue and many in situations like hers, the minimum wage isn't a stepping stone, it's a trap. This is about equity, it's about fairness, it's about respect for the dignity of work and workers, because it is in everybody's interest to ensure a living wage for honest work. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
All right.